He FaceTimed her father while she was bleeding out on the bedroom floor. Not before, not after, during, and that call wasn't a confession. It was a warning. Because the man holding the phone wasn't just Kiara Alleyne's boyfriend. He was the father of her child. They lived together, slept in the same bed, raised a daughter under the same roof. So why did he set their house on fire with her body still inside? And why did he run, burned, bleeding, and holding their infant? We tracked this case from Florida to Trinidad, pulled court transcripts, and interviewed people closest to Kiara. What we found? It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a silent fuse burning for weeks. By the end of this video, you'll see how anyone, even you, could miss the warning signs until it's too late. This is Kiara Alleyne's story, and it's about to change how you see everyone around you. You're watching Crime Vault Stories, and here, we don't chase clicks, we chase justice. If this case already has your heart beating faster, hit that like button, share it, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We read every single one. This isn't just a video, it's a record. Help keep it seen. The first thing that hit deputies wasn't the silence, it was the smell. It clung to the air, a sharp chemical haze that burned the nostrils before the front door even opened. The metal doorknob was warm, too warm. And when they pushed inside the one-story home on any 14th Court in Anthony, Florida, every instinct told them something inside had gone violently wrong. The lights were off, a blanket hung from the oven like it had been yanked out mid-use. On the floor, inches from the doorway, lay a small pink sock. But Kiara Alleyne was nowhere in sight. This was supposed to be a welfare check. A routine call. No forced entry. No screams. Just a quiet house and a father on the phone who hadn't heard from his daughter. Now, minutes later, crime scene tape was stretching across the yard. Kiara was just 20 years old, born in Trinidad and Tobago, raised in Point 14, and building a new life in the US for herself and her 11-month-old daughter. She had plans, a nursing job, a path forward, and a partner. Deangelo Clark, the man she shared her home, her child, and her trust with. What deputies found in that home didn't match any of that. There were no signs of struggle in the living room. But when they turned the corner into the bedroom, the pattern shattered. Kiara was on the floor. Her body was cold. Blood had soaked into the carpet beneath her. Multiple stab wounds marked her chest and torso. Her eyes were still open, but there was no sign of her daughter, and no sign of Deangelo. It would be hours before law enforcement would learn that the most damning part of this story wasn't the body, it wasn't the scene, it was the phone call that happened while Kiara was dying. Earlier that day, Sheldon Alleyne, Kiara's father, had received a FaceTime call from Deangelo. Sheldon was thousands of miles away, back in Trinidad. He answered, expecting to see his granddaughter. Instead, he saw his daughter on the floor, bleeding, struggling to speak, gasping. And Deangelo stood over her, holding the phone with one hand and something else in the other. Sheldon shouted into the screen, but it was no use. Deangelo ended the call. That FaceTime became the silent scream no one could unhear, and it marked the beginning of a chase across the state of Florida. Within the first 2 hours of Kiara's body being found, an Amber Alert went out for her infant daughter. Law enforcement believed Deangelo had taken the child, and they were right. He'd fled in a gray Ford Fusion driving south, but what he didn't know was that his own digital footprint was working against him. He had posted to Facebook. The message read, "Now, I must end my life, just know she tried to kill me. And I'm sorry to her family." It didn't read like remorse. It read like justification. And just like that, Deangelo Clark wasn't just a missing person. He was the prime suspect in a murder. But here's what doesn't add up. Neighbors heard nothing. There were no loud arguments, no broken glass, no sign of a forced struggle. And according to friends, Kiara had made no recent complaints. Nothing about Deangelo that sounded like a threat. Nothing that screamed danger. Until suddenly, there was no more Kiara, and that's the first break in the pattern. How does a woman go from building a life with someone to being found stabbed to death with her baby missing, and no one hears a thing? Was it a sudden explosion, or had the warning signs been subtle, deliberate, easy to miss? There were signs, and they weren't invisible. Just a few months prior, police had responded to a domestic disturbance call at the same residence. No charges were filed, but law enforcement noted rising tension. Friends say Kiara had seemed withdrawn in recent weeks, less talkative, more protective of her daughter. The baby's crib was untouched, toys scattered in a corner, diapers in a neat stack. But there was one object missing from the room. Kiara's phone. It wasn't on her, wasn't in the bed, wasn't in the bathroom. Later it would be found wiped, messages deleted. But not before one strange detail was recovered. A missed call from Deangelo's number placed 6 minutes before the welfare check was requested. Why would a man kill his partner and then call her phone? Or was someone else trying to reach her? As the search intensified, another layer emerged. Kiara's phone had last pinged from a tower 20 miles south, hours after her death, meaning it had been moved with someone, somewhere. By the time this was confirmed, Deangelo's vehicle had already been spotted on surveillance cameras heading toward the Florida Keys. Then came the fire. Roughly 36 hours after Kiara's body was found, Monroe County deputies were called to the scene of a vehicle blaze. A gray Ford Fusion, charred and still smoking, was found on the side of a remote road. No one was inside. But less than a mile away, a man with visible burns was caught on a nearby security camera, entering a local house without permission. When deputies arrived, he identified himself as Deangelo Clark. His infant daughter, Kiara's child, was safe in the back room. She had been with him the entire time. That discovery created another fracture in the case. If his intent was to flee or end his life, why keep the child alive? Why drive south? Why light the car on fire? Was it an escape plan gone wrong? Or the end of a timeline that had been spiraling for days? Deangelo had left behind a sealed envelope. Not a suicide note, not a confession, just a printed quote taped to the inside of a kitchen cabinet. Some people never realize the value of what they have until it sits gone. Was it a warning? A taunt? A final justification? No one knows. And when he was arrested, Deangelo offered no answers, no explanation, no remorse, just silence. He refused to speak to police, refused to explain the FaceTime call, refused to confirm whether the child had witnessed the stabbing. But what they discovered next changed everything. The Amber Alert for Kiara Alleyne's daughter was still active when the next player entered the picture, and it wasn't law enforcement. It was Kiara's mother. She had flown in from Trinidad the day after the murder. No press, no statements, just purpose. According to court records, she went straight from the airport to the hospital where Deangelo was being treated for third-degree burns. And despite warnings from staff and deputies, she insisted on seeing him face to face. He refused. She later told prosecutors that she didn't go to beg, she went to look him in the eye. Because that's what a mother does when she loses a child and needs to know without filters, without press releases, what kind of man could smile at the dinner table one week and leave her daughter bleeding on a bedroom floor the next. But even that confrontation didn't make sense. Deangelo said nothing, not in person, not in statements, not in custody. The man who FaceTimed a dying woman's father had now gone completely silent. And the silence wasn't strategic, it was total. He rejected a plea deal, refused interviews, refused to even speak in his own defense during pretrial hearings, which forced detectives to dig deeper into the digital evidence left behind in the house, and what they found triggered a wait. What moment no one expected. There were no signs of a struggle on Deangelo, no defensive wounds, no blood on his clothing other than Kiara's. But there was one strange detail that police didn't initially understand. The blood spatter in the hallway near the child's room had a pause pattern. A section of wall had no blood, no droplets, just a clean break. Forensic analysts realized what it meant at the moment of the stabbing. Something had been hanging on the wall, something large. Something later removed. According to the incident log, that object was a framed photo of Kiara and her daughter. The same photo Deangelo had removed 2 days prior, without telling anyone. Why would someone take down a family photo before committing a murder? That was the second inconsistency. A killer wiping evidence makes sense. A killer pre-removing emotional triggers. That SIP's not impulsive. That SIP's conscious staging. And it shattered the claim that this was a crime of passion. Now put yourself in the father SIP's place. It's 2:03 a.m. in Trinidad. Your phone lights up. You think it's a check-in call from your daughter. Maybe a video of your granddaughter sleeping. Instead, you see her on the floor. You hear her trying to speak, her voice cut off, your own voice echoing back, helpless. And the man holding the phone doesn't ask for help. He stares, then ends the call. That's not panic. That's theater. According to court transcripts, that FaceTime call lasted 31 seconds, just long enough for Kiara's father to see her condition, just long enough for prosecutors to argue it was premeditated emotional damage. But what did Deangelo gain from it? That's where a new name surfaces. Cynthia Richards, Kiara's former co-worker. She had worked alongside Kiara at a local nursing facility and told detectives something critical. She said Kiara had confided that Deangelo once checked her phone while she was sleeping. Not just messages, deleted drafts, old notes, password changes. Cynthia also revealed that Kiara had started secretly saving money, not for a vacation, for a move. She'd been looking at apartments, quietly, for months. That was the game changer. Kiara hadn't been surprised. She had been preparing. According to search history recovered from her iCloud, she had visited listings for short-term rentals in Ocala, browsed legal aid sites, researched custody arrangements. But here sits the part that made detectives freeze. The last thing she searched 2 days before her death was how to serve emergency custody papers in Florida. She wasn't just planning to leave. She was planning to leave with her daughter. Police files show that Deangelo had accessed Kiara's laptop 3 hours before the attack. Whether he saw the saved documents or intercepted a text is unknown. But the timeline doesn't lie. The signs were there, and the catalyst wasn't the end of a relationship. It was the threat of losing control. And that's what made this story personal, because this wasn't just a domestic dispute. This was the exact scenario countless women face when trying to separate safely from a partner they fear will retaliate. Kiara did everything victims are told to do. She stayed quiet. She saved money. She sought custody. She didn't escalate. She just planned. And it still ended in murder. So here's the internal trigger we can't shake. If this could happen to someone like her, smart, resourceful, surrounded by family, what happens to those with less support? And then came the photo. During evidence review, detectives found a second copy of the family photo taken down from the wall inside Deangelo Sepp's car. It had been scorched by fire, bent at the edges, but the backside had one line written in pen. "She chose the baby over me." It wasn't signed, but the handwriting matched Deangelo's notes from a prior job application. Now the narrative was shifting. This wasn't rage, it was resentment, not spontaneous, but slow burning. The signs were there, the motives were personal, and it raised one final question. Had anyone seen this coming? The answer was complicated. Neighbors recalled small arguments, nothing loud, nothing violent, just raised voices through thin walls. Kiara's family had suspected something was wrong but never had confirmation, and Kiara herself never filed a report, never asked for a restraining order. She just wanted out, quietly, safely. But even the quietest exits have noise, if someone is listening. According to case files, when detectives searched Deangelo's phone history, they found something buried in his deleted cache recordings. Over 3 weeks, he had used a hidden audio app to record 4 conversations inside the home. The app had been disguised as a calculator. One of those recordings, timestamped 7 days before the murder, captured Kiara Sipp's voice, saying, "I'm not staying here if you're gonna act like this. I'm not stay her and go to my mom sits." And Deangelo Sipp's reply, "Then don't yet come back." She never got the chance. That's what made the state's case so powerful. It wasn't just that Kiara died, it's that she tried to live. Every breadcrumb pointed to preparation. Every quiet step was a move toward survival. But someone was watching, listening, planning his own version of control. And that's when the lies started unraveling. Real talk, if you've watched this far and haven't subscribed, why? We lose sleep building these cases to honor victims and wake people up to real danger. If you won't support that, at least tell us why in the comments. We read every one. In the weeks after Deangelo Clark's arrest, detectives returned to the NE 14th Court home with a new mission. Not to collect evidence, but to reread what had already been missed. They weren't looking for weapons, they were looking for patterns. That's when they noticed something strange about the kitchen wall. Directly above the stove, a small patch of beige paint didn't match. The surface had been recently touched up, smooth and slightly glossier than the rest of the wall. Under black light, the original markings showed faint lettering. When technicians enhanced the imprint, it revealed a wiped sentence. "I warned her." 3 words, scrubbed, but not gone. And it changed everything. This wasn't a crime of panic. It was the endpoint of a psychological campaign. because the deeper the detectives looked, the more patterns emerged, subtle, often quiet, but consistent, and they always pointed in one direction: control. Let's go back to the FaceTime call. We now know that it wasn't a moment of guilt. It wasn't an attempt at explanation. It was performance. According to phone records, Deangelo opened the camera app 3 separate times in the hour before the murder. But he didn't call anyone yet. He was rehearsing the angle, practicing how it would look. The FaceTime wasn't a call for help. It was a message. A final act, staged for the one man who loved Kiara most. Sheldon Alleyne's voice can be heard on the recording, panicked, begging, then cut off. The call ended at exactly 31 seconds. She died alone, but not unwitnessed. And this is where the story breaks open. Deangelo didn't just commit a murder. He orchestrated a moment of psychological collapse for Kiara, for her family, for anyone watching, and he used the tools of intimacy to do it. The photo removed from the hallway. The recording saved under a disguised app. The scrubbed sentence on the kitchen wall. Everything was deliberate. But this wasn't the only layer they missed. Detectives reviewing Kiara's iCloud backup found dozens of notes. Most were mundane, grocery lists, reminders, baby care logs. But there was one folder locked behind a passcode that contained private journal entries, encrypted, titled only with a number 1377. Her family didn't know what it meant, but investigators guessed. 13 letters, 77 days. That's how long she had been preparing to leave. One entry read, "He checks my phone now. Only when I sleep, I can let him see the baby bag packed. I keep it in the trunk." Another, "She started mimicking my fear. When he walks in, she stops playing." And the last, "If I don't make it out, please tell my dad it wasn't an accident." That sentence was dated 3 days before her death. Imagine reading that as a parent. Now imagine knowing your daughter tried to warn you, and still ended up as a file number in a homicide report. That's where this case stops being rare, and starts becoming familiar. Because according to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, there were 105 domestic violence-related homicides in 2019 alone. More than 80% of those victims had no public record of prior police intervention, just like Kiara. So let's be clear, she's not the exception. She's the statistic no one sees. The signs weren't dramatic. No restraining orders. No daily fights. No one called the police the night it happened. But the signs were there. A new password. A packed trunk. A baby bag that stayed in the car instead of the closet. These are the quiet moves victims make when they're preparing to survive. And those moves often go unseen until it's too late. Now here's sections where the pattern gets even sharper. Forensic technicians revisiting the crime scene uncovered micro-abrasions on the bedroom doorknob, the kind that form when something is regularly jimmied or tampered with. Further testing revealed that the latch had been filed down, just enough to keep it from locking properly. Kiara had modified the room for her daughter's safety. She thought it was secure. It wasn't. She thought her partner wouldn't cross that line. He did. And remember that cabinet quote Deangelo taped inside the kitchen? Some people never realize the value of what they have until it sits gone. That line wasn't chosen randomly. Investigators discovered it matched a meme posted to a private Facebook group. Deangelo followed a community centered on restoring male household leadership. One of the moderators? A man previously charged with felony battery in a domestic case. The group had fewer than 500 members, but its message was consistent. Women who leave deserve consequence. Deangelo wasn't just angry. He was ideologically primed. And yet thousands of people walk past homes like Kiara's every day, never realizing what's happening behind the walls, never hearing the silence that hides fear, never noticing the bag in the trunk, the missing photo, the door that doesn't click shut anymore. That's the tragedy beneath this story. The pain wasn't invisible, it just wasn't loud. And the silence fooled everyone, even those closest to her. A neighbor later admitted, "I thought they were just private people. I didn't to ask if she was okay." But Kiara was documenting everything. The phone, the files, the notes. She wasn't passive, she was preparing. And the final thread? It came from the baby monitor. Recovered from a scorched corner of the living room, partially melted but functional, technicians pulled the last saved clip. The audio was corrupted, but one phrase was salvageable, Kiara's voice. "It Seb's okay, Just go in your crib, I'll be right here. She said it 12 minutes before her death. 12 minutes, that's how long it took to end a life, reroute a child's future, and leave a family shattered. But the most disturbing discovery was still coming. The courtroom was silent as the clerk read the charges. Every seat was filled. Kiara's parents sat in the front row, their hands clenched. On the defense bench, Deangelo Clark stared straight ahead, unmoving, not remorseful, not reactive, just blank. Then the state played the footage. It wasn't set surveillance, it was personal. The 31-second FaceTime call had already been documented. The jury had seen the transcript. But this was the raw file restored and enhanced. For the first time, Kiara's voice could be heard clearly. And it wasn't screaming, it wasn't begging. It was calm, focused, maternal. Please, not in front of her. In that moment, the jury didn't need forensic analysis. They didn't need a motive board or courtroom theatrics. They needed that one sentence because it meant everything they thought they understood was wrong. The child had been there, awake, watching. That was the emotional peak. And it broke the room. One juror covered her face. Another wiped his eyes. Kiara's father bowed his head. Her mother left the room. The photo of the crime scene no longer mattered. The autopsy reports, the blood pattern analysis, the fire damage, none of it could compete with those 5 words. She wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid for her daughter. This wasn't rage. It wasn't spontaneous. It was strategic, calculated, controlled. And then the prosecution dropped the photo. Exhibit 47. The same family photo found burned in Deangelo's car. But this version was enhanced, color corrected, enlarged, nothing graphic. Just Kiara holding her daughter in the hallway. Look at this photo, the prosecutor said, and tell us what Sep's wrong. The jury stared. At first, nothing stood out. Then it clicked. In the mirror behind them, barely visible, was Deangelo, partially hidden, standing at an angle that didn't suggest photobomb. It suggested surveillance. The reflection showed him holding a phone. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't included. He was watching. And that shattered the final assumption that Deangelo saw this as a family. He didn't set. He saw it as possession. That moment became the fulcrum of the state's case. The jury had heard about the scrubbed "I warned her" message on the kitchen wall, the missing door latch, the removed photo. But now those scattered fragments aligned. The thread cascade hit all at once. The door latch wasn't just broken, it was filed down to prevent Kiara from locking herself in. The FaceTime rehearsal wasn't anxiety, it was orchestration. The sealed cabinet note, "Some people never realize the value of what they have until it's gone," wasn't poetic. It was a control marker. Each thread snapped into place, revealing a single truth. This wasn't an emotional outburst. This was a slow, premeditated descent. And the final reveal didn't come from evidence. It came from a witness. Kiara's close friend, Cynthia Richards, took the stand. She wasn't there the night of the murder. She hadn't seen the crime scene. But she knew Kiara better than anyone. And she knew something no one had brought up in court yet. She kept a go bag in her car, Cynthia said. Diapers, formula, a burner phone. She told me if anything ever felt wrong, she'd drive to my place without stopping. Did she ever use it? The prosecutor asked. Cynthia nodded. Twice. That disclosure reframed the case yet again. Kiara hadn't just planned to leave. She had rehearsed it. She had drills, escape points, contingencies. And Deangelo must have found out. The morning of the murder, her usual bag was missing from the trunk. That detail hadn't been presented in the original report. But a traffic camera caught Deangelo opening the backseat door. Odd, considering he lived in the home. What was he retrieving? Her escape plan. The prosecution used that to deliver one final blow. He didn't just murder her, he dismantled her exit. She had been ready. She had followed every rule document quietly. Don't escalate, prepare safe custody, plan the moment to leave. And still she died at the hands of the man she feared, but never openly accused. The defense argued that Deangelo suffered from situational psychosis. No formal diagnosis, no medical records, just the suggestion that he was pushed to the edge. The jury did not buy it, and neither should we, because the last piece of evidence came from Kiara herself. A handwritten note, found inside the cover of a baby journal she kept on her nightstand. On the final page, next to an ultrasound photo, were just 4 words: "She gets out, period." Let's be honest, if you've made it to this moment, and Kiara's words didn't hit something in you, you wouldn't still be here. So if you haven't subscribed to Crime Vault Stories yet, ask yourself why not. We don't just tell these stories. We document them so others can live. Show us you're with us. Support what matters. That's what this story is about. Not a murder, a mission. A mother who made a decision to survive, to escape, to protect, and a man who couldn't stand not being in control of the outcome. The verdict read guilty, second-degree murder, attempted arson, sentencing to follow. But what no one expected, what not even the prosecution anticipated, was what Kiara's father did next. He didn't speak at sentencing, didn't make a victim impact statement. He walked to the front of the courtroom, opened a manila folder, pulled out a single sheet, and passed it to the bailiff. The judge read it aloud. To the court and to the world. "My daughter died trying to live. Do not let her be forgotten. That child, her child, is our legacy now. We are not broken, we are just beginning." The courtroom rose, no dry eyes. Even the judge paused, but justice was coming. Just not the way anyone expected. And this is where we ask, if you've watched this far, if you've sat with this family's grief, if your heart cracked even once during this case, and you still haven't subscribed, shared, or commented, why? We're not chasing views, we're preserving lives. We read every comment, every share amplifies awareness, every subscription helps another victim's story come forward. Deangelo Clark was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Kiara Alleyne. He received an additional 15 years for attempted arson. No parole, no reduced charges. The courtroom remained silent as the sentence was delivered. Deangelo showed no reaction. He declined to speak. From a legal standpoint, it was closure. But the final thread wasn't in the verdict. It was found weeks later, inside a drawer beneath the oven, taped shut. The contents, a storage unit receipt dated 3 days before Kiara's death, signed by her. Detectives visited the unit. It was empty. But the access log showed Kiara had been there the morning she died. She wasn't waiting. She wasn't undecided. She was already moving. That changes how we view her final hours. She wasn't frozen in fear. She was actively building an escape. It proves she didn't fail. She was intercepted. This isn't just her story. It's a common one. According to the CDC, over half of female homicide victims in the US are killed by a current or former intimate partner. Most of them are in the process of leaving. It's a repeatable pattern. Quiet preparations, followed by an explosion of control. Kiara followed every guideline, secured documents, planned custody, kept her family close, created a go bag, and still it wasn't enough. So what can others learn? If someone you know is preparing to leave, don't push them to move faster. Offer logistical help, not just advice. Be ready to respond, quietly and immediately. Document threats if they can sit. Leaving is not a single decision. It's a sequence. The most dangerous part is near the end. Kiara was at the end, and yet her story continues. Her parents are raising her daughter. Her writings are now used in advocacy workshops in both Florida and Trinidad. One journal entry, "She gets out, period," has become a training tool for domestic violence professionals. This is how she's remembered. Not as a victim, but as a woman who did everything right in a system where outcomes still go wrong. We honor her by amplifying what she left behind: evidence, insight, and the courage to act despite fear. We don't wrap these stories in metaphors. We leave them open, so you feel the urgency that never really goes away. You're not alone. And you're not just watching, you're witnessing. Subscribe to Crime Vault Stories and help us bring light to the stories that almost disappeared. Because this isn't the end. Our next case starts with a phone that never rang and ends with a message that should have been believed. We'll see you there.